Hello, I'm Jack Mecklenburg. Welcome to my presentation for task 1.7 of the Intro to UX Design course, presenting your work featuring Gringo, Lingo. Enjoy! So, let's start by meeting William, my proto-persona, who's the star of this story and this presentation. He's 30 years old. He has a girlfriend. It's pretty serious, but he has no kids, so no commitments or dependents or anything like that. He has a master's in creative arts. He's an English teacher, so he understands learning vocabulary and learning a language, and he also understands how he learns and how he best learns. And he is from London, which is where he still lives. Let's have a look at him in a bit more detail. So he leads an extremely busy lifestyle as a young professional in London. He's very sociable. He likes to go out a lot, meet his friends, drink beers, play sports, that kind of thing. He absolutely loves South America, finds it really interesting, which is summed up in the quote from William in the top right. "I want to learn a language so I can travel with ease. I'm fascinated by the culture in Latin America and wish my Spanish was better so I can communicate with locals." He travels often in the school holidays when he gets his time off. And when he does travel, he really enjoys trying to communicate with locals in their language. He's also somewhat competitive and likes to beat his friends at stuff. So William's goals, he'd love to travel more confidently in South America using the language where he can. He aims to see progression when learning. He likes to look back and see what he's accomplished. And he wants to be a bit better than his friends because, as I said, he's a bit competitive. He also wants to study topics that interest him rather than, things that he feels useless and vocab that he already knows. In terms of a problem, learning a new language is tough. So the aim of Gringo Lingo is to provide a platform that empowers young professionals to learn new vocabulary through quickfire games and the ability to continuously revise their own flashcards. Our problem statement: William needs an engaging and convenient way to learn new Spanish vocabulary because he has limited time to learn but wants to be able to communicate better on his trips to South America. We will know this to be true when we see William progressing through the app and using the new vocabulary he has learned. Now, William faces certain challenges when it comes to learning vocabulary. For example, he struggles with retaining information and constantly forgets new words he has learned and needs to revise quite a lot. He needs motivation to keep learning, something to push him and keep enthusiastic. He doesn't have much free time, as we've already discussed. He leads a very busy lifestyle, so he has limited time for learning. He needs to squeeze it in somehow. And he also needs to feel rewarded for his efforts, feel like he's making progress and achieving something. To sum this up, here are a couple of quotes from William. Well, they're actually from user research interviews, but now they belong to William. So he says, "I think a lack of retention is one of the main challenges when learning." He also says, "When I complete a task, I want to receive a reward or achievement so I feel like I'm accomplishing something and build confidence." So to make sure William can achieve his goals, I created some user flows. These map out his journey for the main tasks he would complete as part of the learning process and then as part of using Gringo Lingo. You can see one here. It's an example of a user flow for playing a revision game. And these user flows then formed the base or step-by-step instructions to begin wireframing and sketching. So I began with some low fidelity sketches, just using pen and paper, and designed some basic navigation screens, including a splash screen, a home screen, a personal profile, a stats page, where William would be able to see his progression and how much he's been learning, and a search page so that he can focus on the topics that he wants to and that are of interest to him. I then sketched out some basic screens that would form the pathway for the two tasks for the user flows, which were creating a new set of flashcards and playing a revision game. There we go, done, right? Not quite. So I encountered several issues with my low fidelity sketches. Firstly, they were hard to read, probably mostly due to my scruffy sketching, which would ultimately make testing difficult. So yeah, they didn't contain enough specific content and vocabulary, meaning testing would be way too hypothetical. There was just too many, words or set titles. It just was very vague and not specific enough. They were too basic and formed a poorly functioning prototype, which didn't accurately reflect the design, make it difficult for to navigate when testing. And they were missing key parts of the user experience as well. For example, there was no onboarding and there was no sign up. So I needed to think of a better solution. I couldn't carry on with these as they weren't quite right and the prototype just didn't feel good. So that, of course, led to digital wireframes. Yippee! So while this had a pretty steep learning curve, once I got my head around some basics of Adobe XD and all its intimidating features, it was actually quite an enjoyable process. Creating screens that were consistent was much easier, as it involved a lot of kind of copy, paste, repeat, and you could get that consistency as you move from screen to screen, or from wireframe to wireframe. And I was able to create sign up and onboarding wireframes, as well as improve all the existing wireframes I had, and power them all into a nice new prototype. So all that was left to do was to put this shiny prototype to the test. Yeah, what could possibly go wrong here? So my test plan consisted of 5 tasks, and I enlisted the help of 3 young professionals with an interest in learning apps to help out. So the tasks were as follows. 1, open the app, complete onboarding and sign up. 2, create a new set of flashcards. 3, review a set of flashcards. 4, play a game of multi-choice. And 5, play a game of pairs. So I chose these tasks as I felt they would give the best insight into how well a user can navigate around the app and use it to learn vocabulary, as it is in its current form in a prototype. As I said, what could possibly go wrong? Well, it turns out the usability testing uncovered some pretty major issues. The first of which was the play a game button you can see on the screen there simply didn't work. It didn't go anywhere. But thankfully this was a relatively easy fix in Adobe XD, and I could simply add a transition to the right page. Another serious issue was with task 2, which was create a new set of flashcards. All 3 of my users found this process difficult and confusing. They didn't like filling in the fields for starters, and they thought that filling in something that more resembled an actual flashcard would be better. But most importantly of all, there was a pop-up message that I'd created, which was causing all kinds of issues. You can see it there on the far right. It was actually kind of hilarious to see their reactions. They found it super confusing to hit the finish button. They thought they'd finished their new set, and then they'd get a pop-up confirming that a new card had been created. And then finally, there was some, testing uncovered a couple of less serious issues, shall we say. One of which was that users couldn't tell that the select game menu was supposed to be a carousel. It sort of resembled a drop-down menu. There was no option to immediately replay a game, which would obviously be good for the experience. And the word review was a little misleading when it came to looking over sets of flashcards. I also uncovered some interesting quotes and suggestions. Some of my favourites that I feel really tie in with William's goals are I'd like to press start on the timer in games. It would be cool if you could share your score to social media. Revising the sets would be more interesting with animation. For example, tapping each card and it spins round to reveal the back. And it might be good to see a comparison with your last time or with a friend from social media. And that last one's in relation to the time to play a game, because all the games are timed. On the back of all these results and feedback, I was actually able to make some great improvements to the Gringo Lingo prototype. The dreaded pop-up message when creating a new set of flashcards is now gone, thankfully, and filling in the card more resembles an actual physical flashcard. There's now a play again button upon completing a game, and you can now revise a set of flashcards instead of review, which I think clears that up. But that's not where the fun ends. Next up for Gringo Lingo, I'd love to test the most recent prototype with these changes for usability, see how they've made a difference. I'd like to improve that select game carousel menu, make sure that's really obvious to the user. I'd like to think about implementing some of the suggestions from usability testing, such as a user-started timer rather than automatic, and some kind of animation in set revision. Yeah, I'd like to include more content and imagery in a higher fidelity prototype, just so that as users test out those games and test the app, it's more of a realistic experience. I'd like to create a task analysis and user flow for challenging friends to games and maybe integrating social media into the app. And then finally, develop an engaging UI to keep users interested in learning through the app. I've learned a lot from this process. So firstly, I've learned the basics of Adobe XD and would happily dive into creating more wireframes now. And this was something that I was really interested in doing, but also I was slightly overwhelmed by initially. So that's great. I've learned that time management is an all-important skill. So at the start of the course, if I'm honest, I was pretty useless at this. But the tasks have become so much easier when I stick to a predefined plan and stick to timings. Number 3 is that I found that users or interviewees don't always do or say what you think they're going to. They can be pretty unpredictable at times, and it's best just to ask open questions and let them kind of lead themselves down a path for the most effective results and to get the best findings. I figured out that you just need to dive into sketching. So I was initially pretty worried about even starting sketching. It was quite intimidating. But the more you do, the easier it gets. And so the best thing is just to start doing it. You can literally improve on every sketch and wireframe that you draw. So the best thing to do is just to start doing it and get stuck in. And on that note, I learned that a user flow is a solid base and basically a set of step-by-step instructions to start sketching. You can use each step in the user flow for, to create a wireframe. And that's awesome. And finally, I now understand that iteration really is key. The Gringo Lingo prototype is already a far cry from the first few scruffy sketches that I did, and I'm sure it would improve endlessly with more testing and iteration and redefining. So that's awesome. That's everything for me. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Thanks for watching. Cheers.